Stacy is a beautiful new doctor in the hospital. All the doctors wear white coats. But she is the only one who is maverick and wears her own JK uniform. Even when entering the operating room, she has to dress herself up beautifully. I scolded her. This is an operating room. You must wear sterile clothes. She turned a deaf ear. And in the end, the patient died of an infection. But Stacy held my brother's hand and cried. It was clearly her surgical mistake. Why do you say it was caused by me? Even my fiancé came out to testify for her. It has nothing to do with Stacy. It was an infection during Leah's operation. In the end, I didn't even have a chance to defend myself. I was stabbed to death in public by the patient's family member. When I opened my eyes again, I went back to the day when I was preparing for the operation. The door in front of me opened. And Stacy, wearing a JK uniform, walked in beautifully. This familiar scene made me realize that I had been reborn. This was a major operation. Because the patient's condition was serious and complicated, the big shots from several departments were all there. Since Stacy, an intern, could get in, she must have a powerful backer. In my previous life, she walked in wearing such a uniform. And I was completely stunned at that time. Even someone without common sense should know that one should wear sterile clothes when entering the operating room. Not to mention that Stacy graduated from a proper medical school. I ordered her to change into sterile clothes. But she took my words as a passing breeze. In the end, the patient on the operating table died of an infection. After that, she cried and accused me to my brother, saying that I made a mistake during the operation and killed the patient. My brother really believed it. Even my fiancé stood up to testify for Stacy, saying that it was all my fault. Just like that, I was stabbed to death by the patient's family member. In this new life, I didn't have time to think too much. I took a few big steps forward and kicked Stacy out. Stacy fell to the ground, and her pure little face was full of a painful expression. She looked at me in shock. Leah, are you crazy? This is an operating room, not your comic exhibition. Get out. I closed the door, disinfected myself again, and entered the operating room. Without that stupid Stacy in this life, the operation went very smoothly. The patient's life was saved. The other big shots were also very happy. I walked out with them while discussing. The patient's family member hadn't come yet, but a deep voice sounded first. Leah, come here. I took off my mask and walked up to Miles. What's the matter? Anger was written all over Miles' handsome face. And he asked me coldly, Stacy is still lying in the hospital bed now because of that kick of yours. Are you crazy? Why did you hit a young girl so hard? Go and apologize to Stacy right now. As he said that, he grabbed my wrist and dragged me towards the ward. The next second, I shook off his hand. Miles turned around and glared at me angrily. Leah, you. I raised my hand and slapped him hard on the face. You allowed your intern to enter the operating room wearing a JK uniform. This is irresponsible to the patient and the hospital. Miles, I think you don't want to work here anymore. Apologize to the patient's family member right away. Before Miles could react, the patient's family member came over with the other big shots. The big shots had all seen Stacy wearing the JK uniform just now. In my previous life, these big shots also testified for me. However, those three people were so active that the patient's family members' emotions were stirred up by them, and they directly stabbed me to death. This time, the patient's family members' emotions were stirred up by me. What's going on? Do you want to kill my son? Miles looked flustered. The other big shots also had a lot of dissatisfaction. Miles, you can't even manage your own intern. And you almost implicated us. Our hospital is really not suitable for you. Miles became the target of criticism. In a panic, he suddenly remembered one thing. Leah, do you want to ruin me? I'm your fiancé. So he still remembered that he was my fiancé. Huh. I sneered and told him, from now on, you're not. But Miles just thought I was talking out of anger. And his expression became very impatient. Do you really think I'm in the mood to coax you now? Leah, I don't like women who threaten to break up at every turn. I only had one question in my mind now. How could I have fallen for such a stupid person? Miles, I'm telling you this seriously one last time. We're breaking up. The impatience on Miles' face froze instantly. And he finally realized that I was serious. Did you say that? Won't you regret it? I sighed. In the face of Miles' gradually improving expression, I said calmly, the thing I regret the most is having liked a piece of trash like you. Leah. Do you really think I won't touch you? Or do you think I won't hit a woman? A dangerous look emerged in Miles' eyes. He took a step forward to get closer to me. I raised my hand and slapped him hard on the face. With a slap. The sound was crisp and loud. Everyone in the corridor was stunned. Miles' face turned red. It was obvious that he wanted to fight back. I smiled and raised my chin. Do you want to hit me? Do you dare? Leah. Miles growled. I slapped him on the face again. The previous slap was for the hospital. And this slap is for the patient. Miles. You indulge the person under you to violate the hospital regulations and despise medical ethics. From now on, you are suspended from all your work and go home to wait for the result. Miles opened his mouth to speak, but I interrupted him directly. Oh. By the way, you'd better apologize to the patient's family member first. I stepped aside slightly to make room for Lao Yu. The patient's family member. Lao Yu had been waiting for a long time. Seeing this, he took a few steps and rushed in front of Miles, knocking him down to the ground at once. And then sat on him and slapped him left and right. You almost killed my son. I'll kill you. I'll kill you. I nodded in satisfaction. Well, his mental state is exactly the same as in the previous life. I was directly killed by this person in my previous life. Miles is a surgeon. He usually doesn't exercise much. Although he is younger than Lao Yu, he is no match for Lao Yu at all. After a while, he was beaten black and blue by Lao Yu. Only then was Lao Yu pulled away. He still kicked in Miles' direction. If anything happens to my son, I won't let you off. Miles got up from the ground in a sorry state, wiping the blood from his nose with the back of his hand, and glared at me hatefully. Leah. I pointed at his face. You'd better deal with your round first. You look like a pig's head. You. I ignored him and directly walked past him. Then I thought of something and turned around to remind him. By the way, try not to take up the hospital's resources. When I arrived at the ward, Stacy was indeed in the hospital bed and had changed into a hospital gown. Seeing that I was the only one coming in, she didn't bother to act anymore. She asked me ferociously. Why did you hit someone? Who opened the VIP ward for you? I asked without answering. This ward costs more than 10,000 yuan a day. How many days have you paid for? Just as Stacy was about to speak, she suddenly glanced behind me. The next second, she started crying and sniffling, as if she had suffered a great grievance. Leah, you are also a doctor. How can you say such things? I'm injured, so of course I need to be hospitalized. Even if there is a seriously ill patient who has no money to be hospitalized and the VIP ward is empty, won't you let him in? Do you still have any humanity? TSK. She is really eloquent. She has really mastered the art of being high-sounding. Miles strode over and asked me sternly. Are you asking Stacy for the hospitalization fee? She was kicked into the hospital by you. And you still have the nerve to ask her for the hospitalization fee? I nodded. Okay. I'll pay the hospitalization fee. Miles sneered. At least you have some humanity. Stacy sobbed softly and asked Miles again. How did you hurt your face? Miles walked to the bedside. Don't worry about me. How is your injury? Let me take a look. Stacy glanced at me and said reluctantly, is this appropriate? My injury is on my stomach. How can you look at my stomach? I got goosens all over. Let him look at it. I've already dumped him. He's single now. I reminded with a smile and turned to leave the ward. I don't care what those two people are doing inside. I brought Lao Yu here and pointed at Stacy in the hospital bed and said, she is the intern doctor who wanted to operate on your son while wearing a JK uniform. Lao Yu was pulled away before he could finish beating Miles. And he still had a lot of anger to vent. He didn't care whether Stacy was a man or a woman. He only knew that Stacy was the culprit who almost killed his son. In an instant, he turned into a fierce man and pounced on Stacy. Miles went up to stop him, but was pushed away by Lao Yu. He staggered backward and hit the corner of the cabinet behind him, groaning in pain. The next second, Stacy's scream rang out. Lao Yu grabbed Stacy's collar and slapped her face. You damned woman. You almost killed my son. Do you know that? Stacy cried out for help. Miles didn't care about his own injury anymore. He pounced on Lao Yu from behind and tried to drag him out. Lao Yu grabbed Stacy's hair tightly. When Miles exerted force, Stacy fell off the bed following the force. She was still wearing a JK short skirt on her lower body. Lao Yu became even angrier. He turned around and punched Miles hard on the cheekbone. Miles covered his face in pain. Lao Yu kicked Stacy, who was just about to get up from the ground, and kicked her back. You're a doctor? You don't wear surgical clothes. You come to the hospital in a short skirt to show off. I'll teach you a lesson. I'll teach you a lesson. Lao Yu's angry scolding, Stacy's crying, and Miles' impotent rage. The scene was very chaotic for a while. I saw that Miles and Stacy had suffered enough, so I persuaded Lao Yu, that's enough. If you keep hitting them, you'll get into a lawsuit. Miles was sitting on the ground now, holding Stacy tightly in his arms. Lao Yu spat at Miles. Damn you. Miles' face, which was as black as the bottom of a pot like a pig's head, said, call the police. I want to call the police. Before I could speak, Lao Yu became aggressive again. You still want to call the police? Come on. Call the police now. He took out his phone to record a video. It's this couple of scumbags who almost killed my son. They're doctors. This woman didn't wear surgical clothes when operating on my son. She was showing off and wearing a short skirt and went into the operating room. No. Stacy covered her face. Miles. Hurry up and grab his phone. Miles quickly let go of Stacy and was about to get up to grab Lao Yu's phone, but was kicked back by Lao Yu. This hearty medical disturbance should come to an end. I stepped forward to persuade Lao Yu. Don't worry. Our hospital will definitely give you an explanation. Lao Yu was very grateful to me. Hector. You saved my son. You are a great benefactor of our family. Don't worry. I will never let you be implicated. At least he said something sensible. And I'll let go of the fact that he stabbed me to death with a knife in the previous life. The real culprits are Stacy and Miles. Of course. There's also my own biological brother. I won't let any of these 3 people off the hook. I checked Stacy's injury report. That kick I gave her didn't cause any real harm at all. Nurse Zhang said. It just hurt for a moment at that time. It didn't even count as a minor cut on the skin. To be honest. Hector. How much force could that kick of yours have? Was it really necessary to be hospitalized? I nodded. Thank you. Then I took Stacy's injury report and went back to her ward. Miles was still comforting Stacy when he saw me come back, and since Old Lee wasn't there at the moment, he regained his bravado. How dare you come back? I was amused by his furious but impotent look. If you had this kind of backbone in front of Old Lee earlier, how could you have failed to protect the woman you love? Stacy, who was still crying on the bed, stopped upon hearing this. What are you talking nonsense about? Miles and I are innocent. I threw the injury report directly in her face. You're perfectly fine. Stop pretending. Get out of this ward. Don't waste our hospital's resources. Stacy was really crying now, with tears streaming down. I'm in this state, and you still say I'm okay? She was indeed quite badly injured now, almost as bad as Miles. They both looked like pigs' heads. I curled my lips into a smile. I didn't cause this. Then you should pay the bill. Which is 12,000 yuan a day. Miles was enraged. Leah, you're going too far. I held out my hand to him. Then you pay for her. Miles. TSK. You can't even afford 12,000 yuan a day. And you can't even win a fight. So what kind of hero are you trying to be? You're a useless wretch. I looked at Stacy sympathetically. I've jumped out of the frying pan. But you've jumped right in. How pathetic. If you don't pay, get out quickly. I reminded him with a smile and then turned to leave. Oldie was very understanding. He was a newly rich man and had plenty of money. He gave each of the doctors and nurses in the operating room a big red envelope. Naturally, no one accepted it. Oldie nodded. I understand. I understand. Then he called the health administrative department and said that he was very grateful to the doctors and nurses who had operated on his son. He listed their names one by one and then asked the relevant personnel. They won't accept the red envelopes. What should I give them instead? The staff naturally understood immediately and told him that sending a silk banner would be fine. Our hospital was naturally praised as well. When my parents heard about this, they were both very happy. As soon as I got back, they praised me. You're quite famous now. Even the people in the health administrative department know your name. This is really a compliment. Not a joke, right? Looking at the beaming faces of my parents, my eyes became sore, and I almost burst into tears. It's so nice to see my parents again. Just as I was about to go up and hug my parents, a deep and cold voice sounded. Becoming famous by stepping on your colleagues. Leah, does the bread made from human blood taste good? I looked up in the direction of the voice. My brother Hector walked down the steps one by one. His cold gaze was like a dense net, tightly enveloping me. We finally meet again. A surging hatred welled up in my heart. But on my face, I put on a confused and innocent expression. Brother. What bread made from human blood? What are you talking about? Hector's lips curved into a cold arc. Stop acting. I already know what happened in the hospital. He walked up to me and looked down at me. There was no trace of affection for me in his deep eyes. Only a cold resentment and a vicious hatred. You've left Miles and Stacy lying in the hospital beds now. Although you didn't do it with your own hands. You used someone else to do your dirty work. Leah. You don't deserve to be a doctor. You don't deserve to be my sister. And you don't deserve to be mom and dad's. Enough. My father interrupted Hector's words in a deep voice. He looked at Hector strangely. Whether Leah deserves to be my daughter is not for you to decide. I already know what happened in the hospital. Leah did the right thing. If it weren't for her, the whole hospital would have been implicated. And even your job would have been at stake. Instead of thanking your sister, you use such vicious words to describe your own sister. Hector, how can you not tell right from wrong now? My mother also couldn't understand Hector now. That intern doctor named Stacy didn't wear a sterile gown when she entered the operating room. Is that something a doctor should do? If the patient died on the operating table due to an infection. Let's not even talk about the if. If it weren't for your sister who got her out, with all those bacteria on her, the patient would really have died on the operating table. I felt a chill all over my body. Because what my mother said was the truth. In the previous life, little you died on the operating table. And I was also stabbed to death by old Liu with a knife. All of this was because of Stacy. As well as Hector and Miles. In this new life, Hector is still the same. He genuinely believes that I'm in the wrong. Even if he is my own brother, I will make his life a living hell for being so unable to distinguish right from wrong. Hector met my gaze. And naturally, he saw the hatred in my eyes. What kind of look is that? He said sharply, turning his head to look at our parents. Mom and Dad. You've seen it too. She's been spoiled by you. Now she doesn't even respect me as her brother. Do you still remember that you're a brother? Leah is your sister. And you're siding with outsiders and speaking of her like this. You're really turning against your own family. I think you don't deserve to be Leah's brother. My father was really angry. Not just because of Hector, but also because of Miles and Stacy. Hector looked at my father disappointedly and nodded. Fine, having fulfilled my absai. I won't care about her anymore. Just keep spoiling her like this. Don't blame me if she gets into trouble in the future. With these words, Hector strode away. My father snorted. What a jerk. He's actually getting angry. What on earth is he angry about? My mother was also extremely disappointed. What's wrong with this Hector? He wasn't like this before. My father said irritably. What else could be the matter? Then he asked me. Does your brother have a crush on that intern doctor? I shook my head. I'm not really sure. He must have. My father pointed at the door. Hector's figure had already disappeared. With his attitude, how can I trust him to manage the hospital? A woman can make him lose his rationality. If the hospital is really handed over to him, something big will happen sooner or later. My mother frowned. Leah, has that intern doctor been fired? And what's Miles doing getting involved in this? Then I remembered. Mom and Dad. I've already broken up with Miles. Break up. Then. My father said angrily. I misjudged him. He's also someone who can't tell right from wrong. All right. Don't be angry. Leah has already taken care of it. My mother soothed him. From now on, the hospital will be handed over to Leah. After saying this, my father turned around and went upstairs with his hands behind his back. My mother watched my father go upstairs until she couldn't hear his footsteps anymore. Then she spoke again. Your father is really angry this time. Fortunately, hadn't fulfilled and sigh. You performed well and saved the hospital in a timely manner. You heard what your father said just now. Your brother is like this now. And I don't know if he can change in the future. In case. At this point, my mother sighed. Her expression was filled with disappointment and helplessness. This is no joke. Leah. You need to be more careful. Don't follow your brother's example. I nodded. I know. Mom. I won't let you and Dad down. In this life, the hospital must be mine. Hector will end up with nothing. The next day, as soon as I arrived at the hospital, Sally, a nurse who was on good terms with me, showed me a video. In the video, Stacy was wearing a white coat and apologizing to each department one by one. I'm sorry. This time it was my fault. Although there's freedom of dressing. This is a hospital. As a doctor, I should abide by the hospital's rules. I forgot to change into a sterile gown that time. I really almost implicated the whole hospital, and all of you. I apologized to everyone. She used the same words for each department. Finally, having fulfilled my sigh, she went to apologize to old Leo. As soon as old Leo saw Stacy, he got angry. He felt like killing her with a knife. How could a simple apology make up for it? You almost killed my son. Is a simple "I'm sorry" enough? How does your hospital manage things? Miles ran in and protected Stacy behind him. The patient is fine now. This is also the credit of our hospital. If you keep making a scene like this, do you want to ruin the whole hospital? Forget about the two of us. Do you also want to ruin the people who tried their best to save your son in the operating room at that time? Old Yu was at a loss for words. That's where the video ended. Sally put away her phone and rolled her eyes. I'm really speechless. He even learned to morally blackmail the patient's family. What's going on in your family? How could you keep such doctors in your hospital? Why haven't they been fired? Can you guess why? I pursed my lips, feeling annoyed. Sally understood. Your brother? I used to like him. But how could he be like this? Have you told your parents? Even if he is your brother, I have to say that if he keeps managing the hospital, something will go wrong sooner or later. Suddenly, there was a commotion outside. The door of my office was opened. And old Yu dragged Miles in. Stacy was chasing after them, still looking like a weak and helpless woman crying. Let him go. Let him go. Old Yu dragged Miles in front of me. Hector. I know everything. This hospital is owned by your family. You saved my son. And I won't cause trouble to ruin your family's hospital. But you have to give me an explanation today. How are you going to deal with these two people? Miles sneered. Although the hospital is owned by her family, it's not up to her. It's up to her brother. What's the use of asking her? Old Yu was silent for a moment. Finally, having fulfilled way, he sighed and nodded. All right. For Hector's sake, you must think. I can let it go. I think old Yu must have misunderstood. He thought that I wasn't valued in my family and that our family favored sons over daughters. I didn't expect that the person who stabbed me to death with a knife in the previous life would actually think of me like this in this life. Although I'm not grateful to old Yu, since he said so, I'll take the opportunity. All right. If you two want to stay in the hospital, then kneel down to old Yu and ask for his forgiveness. Miles couldn't believe it. What did you say? Leah, you want me to kneel down to someone? Impossible. Then get out. It's impossible for him to stay in the hospital while standing. Even if he kneels down, I won't let him stay in the hospital for long. Leaving such a person in the hospital is irresponsible to the patients. That damned Hector. For the sake of Stacy. Even protected Miles. How many patients does he want to kill before he's satisfied? Stacy sobbed and walked out from behind Miles. A man's knees are as precious as gold. I'm a woman. So let me kneel instead. There were tears all over her face. And she looked at me pitifully. If this is what it takes to satisfy you. Does she even know what she's saying? A man's knees are as precious as gold? Then men don't have to work anymore. Since there's gold under their knees. Stacy made a move as if she was about to kneel down. Miles was quick-eyed and grabbed her arm. You can't kneel. Stacy. She's using her power to oppress people. Even if you kneel. She won't let you go. There were tears welling up in Stacy's eyes. But I can't let you lose your job. You've worked so hard to get where you are today. Patients are your life. And you still need to continue treating and saving people. As long as it can let you continue to treat and save people. What's the big deal if I kneel? Miles held Stacy's hand affectionately. Stacy. I remember all the good things you've done for me. So I definitely can't let you kneel. My knees are as precious as gold. And yours are no less precious. I looked at the sky speechless. Lie. I'll count to 3. If you don't kneel. Get out of the hospital. 3. Habun. 2. Stacy broke down and cried out. Questioning me. Why are you treating us like this? Miles hugged Stacy. Leah. Stacy is different from you. She's a delicate woman. 1. The countdown ended. And I smiled slightly. All right. You too. Please leave. My dad said last night that from now on. The hospital. With a thud. Miles knelt down. He stuck out his neck and asked me. Are you satisfied now? What a pity. There's no mirror in my office. Miles can't see how cowardly and pathetic he looks now. Maybe he still thinks he's handsome. Why are you looking at me? Count out to Lau and ask him to forgive you. Miles' face turned red. You. I blinked innocently. Don't you want to stay in the hospital anymore? Miles gritted his teeth. Fine. I'll kowtow. He put his hands on the ground and kowtowed 3 times to Lau. Bang bang bang. He kowtowed without saying a word each time. I hissed, say something. Are you mute? Stacy couldn't stand it anymore. Leah? Miles is a man. How can you humiliate him like this? I looked at Stacy innocently. It's all because of you. If you hadn't insisted on wearing a JK uniform into the operating room and almost killed the patient, why would he have to kneel to others? You. Stacy was at a loss for words. She lowered her head and started crying again with a woo-woo sound. Don't bully Stacy. Miles roared angrily. If you have anything against us, come at me. I looked down at Miles, who was kneeling on the ground. Hurry up and apologize to him. Miles. He took a deep breath and reluctantly squeezed out a few words to Lau. I'm sorry. Mr. Liu. It's my fault. Please forgive me. Lau had vented his anger. But he still didn't show Miles any kindness. I'm telling you. If it weren't for Hector's sake, I wouldn't let you off. Stacy was still crying there. It's your turn. Lau suddenly pointed at Stacy, scaring her so much that her crying stopped abruptly. Lau didn't show Stacy any mercy either. He cursed and urged, crying. Crying. What the hell are you crying about? Hurry up and kneel down and apologize to me. Miles clenched his fists and kept reminding, Mr. Leo. After all, Stacy is a woman. Please show some respect. Apologizing for doing something wrong is only right and proper. What does it matter if she's a man or a woman? Just kneel there honestly. Why are you butting in? Miles. I have to say, Lau was kind of cool at this moment. Fine. I'll kneel. Stacy also knelt down in front of Lau. Mr. Leo. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Lau pointed at Stacy's nose. If I see you wearing a short skirt and showing off in the hospital again, I'll kill you. Miles stood up and helped Stacy up. Stacy. Let's go. He put his arm around Stacy and walked out, leaving Lau and me with a cold and haughty back. Lau was so angry that he cursed. What the hell are you pretending to be? If you had the guts, you shouldn't have knelt down just now. Now you're acting tough. Why weren't you this tough when you were acting like a coward? Are you even a man? There's not a shred of gold under your knees. Go to hell. Miles' back stiffened. And he didn't dare to look back. He just took Stacy and left. Lao Yu pointed at the door. Hector. If a person like this continues to stay in your hospital, don't blame me for being blunt. Sooner or later, he'll get you all into trouble. I silently looked at the door and didn't say anything. They won't stay in the hospital for long. Not just Miles and Stacy, but also Hector. My parents went to a meeting in another city again. They told me this morning that they were leaving the hospital to me. If there was anything I couldn't handle, I should call them. Hector protected Miles and Stacy. I should have called my parents immediately. But if it doesn't make a big scene and is too easy to resolve, it won't deal a fatal blow to Hector. He's different from Miles and Stacy. He's my parents' biological son. Even if my parents are disappointed in him, they won't abandon him. So, let's wait a little longer. At noon, Sally brought 2 servings of food to my office. While massaging her shoulders and waist, she showed me the video she secretly recorded. In the video, Lao's kneeling on the ground with his neck stuck out looked even funnier than when I saw it in person. Sally rolled her eyes and complained. Come on. He has already knelt down. What's he still being tough for? That Stacy is also stupid. She said a man's knees are as precious as gold. And since she's a woman, she'll kneel. She's really embarrassing us women. I almost spat out my food and closed her phone. Stop watching for now. Let's eat. Send me the video later. And, stupidity doesn't discriminate between men and women. As soon as I finished speaking, there was a knock on the door. The next second, the door of the office opened, and Miles' father walked in with a smile. Miles ran over from behind and grabbed his arm to pull him out. Dad, get out. Shut up. Miles' father slapped Miles' hand away and slapped the back of Miles' head. Hurry up and apologize to Leah. Miles pointed at me. Dad. What's wrong with you? You want me to apologize to her? Does she deserve it? Sally slapped her chopsticks down and walked over. Miles. What the hell are you pretending to be? Without Leah, who the hell are you? How many surgeries have you completed independently? It's so hard for you to do a surgery independently. And in the end, it's Leah who has to clean up your mess. Count how many times Leah has cleaned up your mess for you. If it weren't for Leah, you would have gone to jail long ago. What the hell are you still pretending to be? There's nothing shameful about relying on a woman. But don't bite the hand that feeds you. Your dad is right. Hurry up and apologize to Leah. Miles' face turned red from being scolded by Sally. You. I walked over and pulled Sally behind me in time. I didn't even look at Miles but said to Miles' father. I've already broken up with Miles. Miles gritted his teeth. When he heard me say this, he said coldly, that's right. I've already broken up with her. Slap. Miles' father raised his hand and slapped Miles in the face again. This time, it landed on Miles' face. I told you to apologize to Leah. Dad. How could you hit me in front of her? Sally sneered. Even your dad knows this truth. But you don't? You're just a Phoenix man who can only get to where you are today by relying on a woman. What's the use of being so stubborn? Just kneel when you should. Miles' hand pointing at Sally was trembling. Leah. You're just going to let her scold me like this? I shrugged. I can't help it. I can't stop her from telling the truth. Can I? Miles gritted his teeth and nodded. Fine. Leah. You just wait. I'll show you my strength. He uttered harsh words and turned around and strode out. Miles. You. Miles' father seemed to have aged a lot. This ungrateful thing. Leah. For my sake. Give Miles a chance. Uncle. You've raised this son badly. I reminded him. If you have the means, you and Aunt should have another child. Miles' father. The way Miles proved that he wasn't a Phoenix man and that he had strength himself was by taking on a surgery that he had never successfully completed before. And he scheduled it for when I was on vacation. Fortunately, Sally called me. When I rushed to the hospital, the surgery was already halfway through. Sure enough, something went wrong. The door of the operating room opened, and the nurse ran out in a panic. Red blood cells. Hurry up. Red blood cells. This wasn't the time to assign blame. I immediately changed into a surgical gown, disinfected myself, and entered the operating room. It turned out that not only was Miles there, but Stacy was also there. These two people forgot the pain even though the injuries on their faces hadn't healed yet. They were simply courting death. Ah! Stacy let out a scream. It's no use. The patient is dying. What should we do? What should we do? Miles? Didn't you say you could do it? Do you really have the confidence? Shut up. Miles roared angrily. Can't you see I'm doing the surgery? Tears welled up in Stacy's eyes instantly. Why are you yelling at me? I'm just worried. I walked over quickly. First checked the patient's condition. And then took the scalpel from Miles' hand. Get out of the way. After more than 3 hours of rescue, the patient was finally saved. I didn't have time to relax and quickly walked out of the operating room. Miles and Stacy were both outside the operating room. This time, sorry. These two people knew they were scared and were worried that the patient's family would hold them accountable if something happened to the patient. I strode up to Miles and without saying a word, slapped him hard in the face. Who allowed you to take on this surgery privately? Do you know that if I hadn't rushed over today, you would have killed the patient? Miles still wanted to quibble. And the doctors and nurses who were in the operating room just now all came out. Other people in the hospital also came over to accuse Miles. You're not qualified to take on this surgery. Who gave you permission? I questioned. In the sight of the patient's family, Miles couldn't say a word. I looked at the patient's family. Call the police. Miles panicked. Leah. Do you want to ruin me? Stacy reacted quickly. Leah. You're going too far. Miles' surgery was almost successful just now. You went in halfway to take the credit. How dare you call the police? Miles also reacted and stuck out his neck. That's right. I raised my hand and slapped Stacy. Shut up. It's you two who almost got us involved too. Miles' second assistant pointed at him. You're not qualified to do this surgery at all. You almost killed the patient. Miles still wanted to say something. But the patient's family had already called the police. Soon the police arrived. After investigation, Miles really wasn't qualified to do this surgery. But the patient's family didn't sue Miles. Instead, they chose to settle it privately. As long as Miles was willing to pay 2 million yuan in compensation. 2 million yuan? Miles exclaimed. Where do I get that much money? Then you can just wait to go to jail. The patient's family said simply and firmly, leaving Miles no room for negotiation. In the end, Miles chose to pay the compensation. Our hospital also fired Miles and issued a notice within the industry. From now on, no other hospital will hire Miles. Unless he opens a hospital himself. But then no patient will dare to go to the hospital he opens either. Miles took out all the savings in his family. But he could only scrape together 500,000 yuan. He really couldn't come up with the remaining 1.5 million yuan. Sally said. Do you think Miles will come to make peace with you and ask you to pay that 1.5 million yuan? I'm not a fool. How could I give him the money? A few days later, I got the news that Miles had managed to scrape together 2 million yuan and paid it to the other party. I was still puzzled. How is that possible? Where did he get so much money? Just then, my father called. Leah. Oldzu called me just now and asked me when I would give him the money for that set of equipment. I gave 1.5 million yuan to your brother. Didn't I? Why hasn't he made the payment yet? I've been calling him. But he hasn't answered. Is he at the hospital? Your brother might have used that money. Even if you ask him for it now, he can't give it to you. This bastard. All right. I'll give the money to Oldzu first. My father said angrily and hung up the phone. I just found out where Miles got that 1.5 million yuan. Hector is really great. For the sake of Stacy, he was willing to spend so much money on his love rival. How did Stacy manage to do that? I hired a private detective to investigate, and soon got a lead. And I told my parents everything about Hector embezzling public funds for Stacy. After hearing this, my parents were even more extremely disappointed in Hector. They called Hector, and finally got through. It was more than 2 hours later that Hector came back. My father asked in a solemn voice. Did you use that 1.5 million yuan? Hector glanced at me. To his credit, he admitted it. Yes, I used it. My father was extremely angry and picked up the vase on the table and threw it at Hector. Hector dodged to the side. It's just 1.5 million yuan. I used it. So what? Dad. The whole hospital will be mine in the future. I just used 1.5 million yuan now. The hospital is not yours. The whole Leah family is not yours. Since you dared to embezzle public funds. How can I still trust you with the hospital and the Leah family? My mother stepped forward crying. Hector. How did you become like this? Get out. My father was so angry that his chest heaved violently. Get out of here. I don't have a son like you. My mother was still persuading him. Hector. Apologize to your father. Break up with that woman. And tell your father that you will never dare to do it again. Hector pushed my mother away. I won't break up with Stacy. I will never break up with her. I don't want anything from the Leah family. I can give Stacy happiness on my own. After saying that, he raised his finger and pointed at me. Don't think I don't know that you're behind all this. Leah. Just you wait. He let go of me and turned around and strode away. My father chased after him. How dare you threaten your sister? What does this have to do with your sister? I quickly went over to soothe my father. Dad. Calm down and take it easy. This Hector really didn't disappoint me at all. Hector ran away from home and went to find Stacy. Stacy was also fired from the hospital. Just like Miles. She was publicly reported within the industry. She couldn't find a job now and just stayed at home. The private detective I hired had been following her for the past few days. And she and Hector were officially together. The two of them had been sweetly in love these days. They really had a lot of nerve. Now, what about Miles? Soon I received a video from the private detective showing Stacy and Miles secretly meeting. As soon as they saw each other, they hugged and started kissing. Miles pressed Stacy against the tree trunk and kissed her fiercely. He almost kissed her lips raw before letting her go. He gasped and asked her, "When on earth are you going to break up with Hector?" Stacy wrapped her arms around Miles' neck. "As long as you know that I really love you. But I really can't leave Hector now. I just got 1.5 million yuan from him. If I break up with him now, he definitely won't agree." Miles said sorry. Do you know how can be translated as upset or distressed I am when I think of my beloved woman being with him? I can't even sleep at night. Stacy pouted and Kokakisli said, "Then I'll make it up to you properly." Then the two of them started behaving shamelessly in the woods of the park. I couldn't stand it when I saw this and exited the video. I feel like I've got a sty in my eye. Hector started pursuing Stacy when she was in college. In the past few years, all the money he earned was spent on Stacy. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been unable to come up with 1.5 million yuan and resorted to embezzling public funds. Hector didn't have a penny in his hand now. After living a life of being content with just love for a few days with Stacy, the two of them couldn't hold on anymore. Stacy had persuaded Hector to go home and admit his mistake, but Hector was too proud to bow his head to my parents. So the two of them came up with a sneaky plan, making money through live streaming. In order to attract attention, they criticized me together in the live broadcast room, saying that I was a vicious rich girl who bullied the poor, and that someone like me didn't deserve to be born into a medical family at all. My parents were extremely angry. "This damned Hector is really courting death," I said coldly. "Mom and Dad, I can't help but fight back now." My parents no longer considered Hector as their son. So they let me deal with this matter. I directly released the video recorded by old Liu in the hospital before. The surveillance footage of the hospital corridor. And the industry notice. All of a sudden, all the attention that Hector and Stacy had attracted backfired on them, turning into a thorough online dalliance. It can't really be called online dalliance. It should be said that the online judges were passing judgment. Not only that, but Miles was also implicated. After all, Miles was involved in all the messy things Stacy had done. Miles was very angry and found Stacy to question her. Stacy didn't know what to do and could only use her feminine Miles. Miles fell for it again. Just as the two of them were being affectionate, Hector appeared. Naturally, I tipped him off. Sure enough, Hector was instantly filled with rage. After all, he had ended up with nothing and being cyberbullied all because of Stacy. He rushed over and separated the two of them, and slapped Stacy hard. Miles stepped forward to protect Stacy. Hector attacked without discrimination and kicked Miles in the lower body. Miles fell to the ground on the spot. Hector sat on him and punched him one after another. Stacy shrieked and tried to pull Hector away. Hector then turned to hit Stacy. Miles really loved Stacy. Even though he was almost incapacitated, he still didn't forget to protect her. He gritted his teeth and endured the pain, picked up a stone from the side, and without hesitation, smashed it on Hector's head. Hector died. Miles was taken into custody. A year later, Miles was sentenced to death. He was not convinced and wanted to appeal, but the second instance upheld the original judgment. As for Stacy, because of this incident, her popularity soared and she became an internet celebrity. But she was soon banned. You know, she used to be a doctor. With such a lack of medical ethics, how could the country allow her to smear the image of doctors? Later, I never heard Stacy's name again. On the day when Miles was executed, Sally and I saw Stacy while we were shopping. On the main road, she was pinned to the ground by several people, and her clothes were being torn. Her hair was grabbed tightly by one hand. "You shameless bitch. I won't let you seduce my husband." Soon, Leonardo Lausai, the woman's husband, was also dragged over by several strong men and pinned to the ground together with Stacy. Stacy struggled and shrieked, desperately protecting her clothes. When she looked up, she saw me and her body froze suddenly. The people around her took this opportunity to tear off her clothes. Stacy still stared at me firmly and suddenly burst into laughter. "Leah, are you satisfied seeing me like this?" Before she could finish her words, she was slapped in the face. I took my eyes away and left with Sally. And next time I got news of Stacy was when she was sent to prison for intentional injury. It turned out that she had been a mistress. But she was not satisfied that the man finally returned to his family, and her video was spread all over the internet, making it impossible for her to find a job. So she chose to take revenge on that man and drove into him, leaving him disabled. I just glanced briefly at this news, put down my phone, and went to do my rounds in the hospital. My parents handed over the hospital to me. I only know that there will never be people like Stacy and Miles in the hospital again. And I will continue to be a doctor, treating the sick and saving lives.